Hello everyone, welcome back. New day, new topic. Like we said, or like I told you, now we are moving towards the end, or for me, or I think, according to the syllabus, we are moving towards optimization. What do you mean by optimization? Well, now everything is running, everything is working well. What I'm trying to do is, or what I'm trying to see is there a way of getting better? So with the help of queuing models, try and understand, is there a better way of queuing the jobs? With the help of simulation, trying to understand the demand so that I produce according to the demand. Similarly now, with the help of the next topic, and the next topic that we are going to do is LPP, very widely known as linear programming problems. What are we going to do in linear programming problems? Like I said, right now that you are producing is not wrong in any way. You are producing. But is there a way to make this production better? Is there a way of bringing out more profit out of things? Is there a way of optimizing things in a way so that I get better results out of whatever I am doing? And that is exactly what we are going to do now is, or I like to call this section a section called economics of optimization, where we are going to use statistics and economics to optimize the things that we have been doing. And what we are going to do now is we are going to do something called as linear programming problems. If you have done mathematics in the 11th and the 12th standard, you have done this. There is nothing new, there is nothing different. This is it. LPP, linear programming problems. You have done this in the 11th and the 12th standard. What are we going to do? We are going to do the exact same that we did in the 11th and the 12th standard. And that is why the sheet that I have created is a sheet which is your 12th standard plus your FY BCom questions. So that people who are doing this for the first time are not dumbfounded as to, oh, what is this and I don't know how to do it. So don't worry, I'm going to do it right from basics. What are we going to do in linear programming problems? Let's, like usual, let's take examples and understand this. What we are going to do in a linear programming problem is, suppose you are a manufacturer. And you are manufacturing tables and chairs. So you have a workshop of furniture and you are making tables and chairs. The question now is, how many tables and how many chairs should you produce? So let's say every table gives you a profit of 200 rupees and every chair you make gives you a profit of 150 rupees. Do you notice there are more of the profit is more from tables? Then make 10,000 tables only, don't make chairs. Can't do. Just because tables has more profit doesn't mean I can only make tables. When people buy tables, what will they do? They put tables in their houses and what, stand around them? No, you need chairs. So you have to make chairs as well. So these are your two products, tables and chairs. The question now is, what should be your product mix? What do you mean by product mix? What mix should the number of tables and the number of chairs be so that you get maximum profit out of that mix? Fine, then make 10,000 tables and make 40,000 chairs. Fantastic. Who will give you the resources to make 10,000 chairs and 40,000, to make 10,000 tables and 40,000 chairs? Do you have the resources? Do you have the manpower to make that much? Do you have the machine time to make that much? Do you have labor to make that much? Do you have the capacity to transport these? Do you have the capacity to hold it anywhere? Do you have a warehouse where you can put this? Who's going to answer all these questions? के बोल दिया, make 10,000 tables and 40,000 chairs, काम हो गया. Doesn't work that way. This production of tables and chairs is subject to, what do you mean by subject to? Is dependent on, or is what do you call it? Subject to can also be said, yes, one would be dependent on, and the other is relying on your resources. Now let's say the major resource that you require to make tables and chairs is number 1 wood and number 2 labor. So what will happen? Wood and labor is available in a restricted format. Like for example, let's say no matter how much wood you use, remember that I can only hold 100 feet of wood in my warehouse. So if you are deciding on a monthly production, my monthly capacity of wood is only 100 feet. Do not ask for more than 100 feet. What about labor? I have 4 people working for 8 hours a day, working for 25 days. So 4 people working for 8 hours, working for 25 days. I have a total of 800 hours of labor available. So no matter what production you plan, make sure that you do not ask me for more than 100 feet of wood and more than 800 hours of labor. And that is going to be the task. The task is going to be making tables and chairs, understanding that the profits that I have is a total of 200 per table and 150 per chair, but also understanding that this production of tables and chairs, why don't you make 50,000 tables and 80,000 chairs? I can't. I have a resource limitation. I cannot use more than available resources. So can I say one thing? Profit is saying keep making as higher as possible. Keep making tables and chairs. But resource is saying there is only limited resource available. So profit wants you to make more while resource wants you to make less. And this is what you have to do. You have to find that sweet spot for the number of tables and chairs such that you have used up all the resources well and you have gained maximum profit out of it. What do you mean by used the resources well? I'll tell you. Suppose a table requires 4 feet of wood and one chair requires 1.5 feet of wood. What I have remaining with me is 6 feet of wood. Now I have to decide what do I make with this. What can you make? Well, one table requires 4 feet of wood. I can make one table, but what will happen? I will be left with 2 feet. Are fantastic then. You can make another chair in it. So with 6 feet of wood, you can make one table and one chair. But one table will require 4 feet of wood, one chair 1.5 feet, a total of 5.5 feet will be used. You will still have half a feet remaining. Okay, what is the other choice? Well, the other choice is What is the other choice? Well, the other choice is, why don't you not make any table? And with 6 feet of wood pending, you can make 4 chairs. 4 into 1.5 feet is 6. How much of wood will remain? Well, I will use all the 6 feet, no pending. Here there will be half a feet pending. Okay, let's talk money. I am concerned with profits. These are the two choices you have. If I make one table, I will get 200 rupees, and one chair, I will get 150 rupees. This combination gives me a profit of 350 rupees. What about this combination? Well, one chair gives me a profit of 150 rupees. You are making 4 chairs. 150 into 4 is going to be 600 rupees. I get a profit of 600 here. So in the second option, number 1, no wood is wasted and I get a very good profit. So what is a better idea? Obviously, making 4 chairs out of the pending 6 feet wood is a good idea. Now in practicality, I can't sit and do this. Oh, let's make 4 tables and 2 chairs and then find out what the profit is. And then let's make 5 tables and 1 chair and find out what profit is. Or at the same time, let's check if the resources are being used well or not. You don't have to do that. All this for you will be done by linear programming problems. So what will a linear programming problem give you? In a linear programming problem, they will tell you what you are producing. So you will say that if I am producing tables and chairs, then they will give you the profit of that production. Profit as high, the better. But resource available is not high. Resources are not unlimited. So resources are saying use only what is available. Profit is saying go as high as possible. I have to find that sweet spot in between that will give me the best profit and will use up the resources also to the finest. There could be another kind of problem also in this. What is the other kind of problem? Well, the other kind of problem is, suppose you are feeding animals. So you have a farm and you are feeding animals. Now animals are given grass. Sometimes in the rainy season there is green grass. Off season there is no green grass. So you give them dry hay. And along with dry hay now, because green grass has nutrition, dry hay does not have nutrition, we have to compensate for the nutrition. So we say we have to give them 2 types of nutrients. One is Horlicks and the other is Complan. Okay. What is going to happen? Well, you are going to feed the animals with Horlicks and Complan. Well, it is going to cost you money. 1 kg of Horlicks, if you feed the animal, will cost you 400 rupees and 1 kg of Complan will cost you 250 rupees. Horlicks is rich in vitamins and minerals, while Complan is rich in proteins and fats. So you have to mix them up and give it to the animal so that the animal is healthy. The problem is, to keep the animal healthy, can't I give the animal anything that I want? Like you want the animal healthy, Then on a daily basis, give the animal 10 kgs of Horlicks and 5 kgs of Complan. 10 kgs of Horlicks will cost you 4,000 rupees and 5 kgs of Complan will be 6250 rupees. Is that correct? No. 250 into 5 is 1250, sorry. 1250 rupees. What is this in total? This is going to be a total of 5250 rupees. Give them 100 kg and 50 kg. Wait. I have to count money for this. So the more you give them, the more money that goes. Oh, I'm sorry. So do one thing, don't feed them. Let them die. Array, I can't do that also. Okay, so you are telling me you can't feed as much as you want to, paisa jayega. Then I'm saying don't feed only, no? Array, I have to feed them because now there is something called as a minimum requirement. What if I tell you that this animal has a minimum requirement of 50 grams of vitamins and minerals and 80 grams of proteins and fats? Oh. So I can't feed them high because I am wasting money. I can't feed them nothing because then the animals will not get the nutrition. So here now if you notice, there the profit was asking you to go high, but the resources were asking you to keep it low. So you found that sweet spot in between. Here the cost is asking you to keep low, but then the requirement is saying keep high. No, how does it matter? It's nutrients. The more you give them, the better. But it's cost, so I have to keep them low. Then don't feed them. I can't do that also. There is a minimum requirement. So every time you look at an LPP, there are going to be two things. One is your objective and the other is your constraints that come from your resources. What is your objective and what is your resource constraint? Well, the objective will be a profit-based objective, and if it's a profit-based objective, I will try to keep the profit as maximum as possible. But then the problem is the resource will not be available that much. So profit needs to go up, but resources need to be used at the best. Another problem could be my objective could be a cost-based objective, like in this case. If it is a cost-based objective, then I will have to keep the costs as low as possible. But then now the resources will say that I have to keep my feeding as high as possible. And this is going to be your job, where one wants to go high, one wants to keep low, while in the other case one wants to keep low and one wants to keep high. You have to find that sweet spot in between where both agree to that high and that low. And that will be done for you by linear programming problems. When I read questions and we do questions, you will understand this better. Remember, just right now from this, I want you to understand one and only one thing. Every linear programming problem will have two things to it. Number one, an objective function that could be either maximizing profit or minimizing cost, and my resources that will ask you to go against it. If you have to maximize cost, profit, resources will ask you to keep it low, and if you have to minimize cost, resources will ask you to go high. You have to find the sweet spot in between the two. So in every question, you have to identify what your objective is and what are your constraints or your resources that are restricting your objective. Well, if they are restricting your maximization of profit or they are restricting your minimization of cost, like in this case, I want to minimize cost, then don't give them anything. No, that I can't do. There is a minimum requirement of 50 gram and 80 gram that I have to fulfill. Fine. Then fulfill that and keep the cost at its minimum. And this is where we are going to formulate an LPP. So an important chapter, because in your finals, which is your final exam, not this final exam, I mean finals, foundation, inter and final. In the final level, you have one step ahead of whatever we are doing here. So here we are only going to formulate. In the final level, we are going to formulate and then we are going to solve. And that is why this for me is extremely important. Even project management. Project management at this level, they don't really ask you anything. But project management goes one step ahead at the final level. And that is why it's the basics right now, it's the stepping stones. So I want you to make sure that you understand it well at this level, so that next level pay you will not have to struggle too much. When you read an LPP question, you have to read it from start to end. Write down whatever you read and then make a table. And that table is going to be compulsory, because once you draw the table, everything will fall into place. I'm going to do 1 or 2 questions back to back. Then what I want you to do is pause the video before I start the question, or I tell you what question I'm going to do. Try the question yourself and then come back to my solution. Let's begin with questions. Let's come to the first question that I want to do, which is question number 2. Let's read the question from start to end first. A factory manufactures 2 types of articles, X and Y. What does a factory manufacture? It manufactures 2 types of articles. One article is X and the other is Y. Okay. To manufacture article X. So the first thing that let's continue. To manufacture article X, a certain machine has to work for 2.5 hours. And in addition, a craftsman has to work for 1.5 hours. To manufacture article Y, the machine has to work for 1.5 hours. And in addition, a craftsman has to work for 2 hours. In a week, a factory can avail 80 hours of machine time and 70 hours of craftsman time. The profit per article X is 150 and per article Y, the per article X is 100 and per article Y is 150. Construct the problem to maximize profit. Okay. They're asking you to construct a problem to maximize profit. Fantastic. What did you read? Well, I read the following things. Number 1, I read some article X and some article Y, whose profits are given to you, whose profits have to be maximized. They only told us. Okay. So your objective is to maximize profit of X and Y. What else did you read? Well, I read that to manufacture X and Y, I have resources. What are the resources? One resource is machine time and the other resource is craftsman time. What is happening? These resources are limited, or these resources are constrained, because of which I have to decide how many of X and Y to make so that I get maximum profit. Fantastic. Whoever's profit you have to maximize become your objectives. X and Y, I have to maximize the profit of X and Y. Then X and Y become my variables. And producing X and Y is being limited by the machine and the craftsman time. And that is why the machine and the craftsman time become my constraint. Once you have identified your variables and your constraints, the next step is write down your variables horizontally and write down your constraints vertically. I'll repeat. Once you read the question, you understand what your objective function is. Here it is maximization. So whoever's profit you have to maximize become your variable. Write them down horizontally. And whatever resources are given to you, write them down vertically. At the end, write down profits. Now read the question from start to end and start filling up the table. A factory manufactures 2 articles, X and Y. Okay. To manufacture article X, a certain machine has to work for 2.5 hours. to manufacture article X, a machine has to work. So X on the machine takes 2.5 hours. And in addition, a craftsman has to work for 1.5 hours. So to make the same article X, after the machine has worked for 2.5 hours, a craftsman has to work for 1.5 hours. Fantastic. To manufacture the article X, a machine works for 2.5 hours and a craftsman works for 1.5 hours. To manufacture article Y, a machine has to work for 1.5 hours and in addition, a craftsman has to work for 2 hours. Done. Machine on X 2.5, craftsman for X is 1.5, machine for Y is 1.5, craftsman for Y is 2. The factory can avail 80 hours of machine time. This is the maximum availability of machine time. Yes. Who is this 80 hours for? Is it for X or is it for Y? There's nothing like that. It's 80 hours in total. You can use it for whoever. You can use it for X or you can use it for Y. Okay. So I can't write the 80 is available for X or Y. So can I say the machine time and make a new column called total available? Total available machine time is 80 hours and total available craftsman time is 70 hours. The profit per article X is rupees 100 and per article Y is rupees 150. This is it. Your table is complete. And if your table is in place, then everything one after the other will automatically fall into place, and that is why this table is extremely and extremely important. I'm going to repeat this again only once for this question. A factory manufactures two articles X and Y. To manufacture the article X, a certain machine has to work for 2.5 hours and in addition, a craftsman has to work for 1.5 hours. To manufacture an article Y, a machine has to work for 1.5 hours and in addition, a craftsman has to work for 2 hours. In a week, the factory can avail 80 hours of machine time and 70 hours of craftsman time. The profit per article X is 100 and per article Y is 150. Formulate to maximize profit. So I read X and Y as my products that give me profit and machine and craftsman time which are my limited resources. Once I read that, whoever's profit has to be maximized has to be written horizontally. And whatever resources are available, for example, machine time and craftsman time have to be written vertically. Start filling up. To manufacture article X, it takes 2.5 hours on the machine and an addition of 1.5 hours for the craftsman. So for X, 2.5 hours on the machine and 1.5 hours on the craftsman. To manufacture the article Y, a machine has to work for 1.5 hours and a craftsman has to work for 2 hours. So for Y, machine has to work for 1.5 hours and craftsman has to work for 2 hours. The factory can avail 80 hours of machine time and 70 hours of craftsman time. So the total available is 80 hours of machine time and 70 hours of craftsman time. The profit per article X profit. So let me make a new place. The profit per article X is 100 rupees and per article Y is 150 rupees. Formulate the problem to maximize profit. So once this is done, let me quickly finish off the table. Done. Once the table is done, we start with the formulation. What do you want me to do? You want me to maximize the profit of X and Y? So I'm going to start off by saying, and this only one question I'm writing so much detail. Huh? Later I'm going to talk, you will have to write it down yourself because I don't want to waste time writing down. We are going to say, let us produce X units of X and Y units of article Y. So let's talk about machine time. If I'm making X articles of X and Y articles of Y, suppose I'm making 1X. 1X requires 2.5 hours on the machine. What if I'm making 2? Well, if 2 you are making, then 2.5 into 2, which is 5 hours. What if I'm making 3? Well, then it's 2.5 into 3. What if I'm making 4? Or 2.5 into 4. Then what if I'm making X articles? Then the total machine time to make X is 2.5 X. Okay. What about the article Y? How much machine time do I require? Well, 1 unit requires 1.5 hours, 2 will require 3, 3 will require 4.5, 4 will require 6 hours. But I'm making Y, I haven't decided yet. So if you're making Y articles, the total time on the machine to make Y is going to be 1.5 Y. So the total time on the machine to make X units of X and Y units of Y is 2.5X plus 1.5 Y. What about craftsman time? Well, one article of X requires 1.5 hours for the craftsman. I am making X articles, so I will require 1.5 X hours for the craftsman. How long will the craftsman to take Y? Well, one article takes 2 hours, so Y articles will take 2 Y hours. So the total time I require on the machine for production is 2.5X plus 1.5Y, and the total time I require for the craftsman to work on is 1.5X plus 2Y. But the problem is, I don't have ample available. I have only 80 hours of machine time and 70 hours of craftsman time. Okay. Which means if I have 80 hours, I have to use the 80 hours? No. I'll give you an example. Which this happens in every Maharashtrian household. So if you are Maharashtrian, or maybe this is a middle class thing, I'm not too sure, but have you ever painted your house, like basic painting? So the number one thing about a Maharashtrian house is about a middle class, at least I can speak for Maharashtrian. So a middle class Maharashtrian houses, we like colors. So we don't stick to the whites and the eggshells. No. We want the whole room to be pink, and then the bedroom will be green, and then the kitchen will be purple for some reason. We can't stick to whites. No. Ganda hota hai. So we want colors. I'm still okay with that. Fine. Now if you are getting your house painted with oil paint, which used to be back in the day, at the end of it, whatever paint is left has to be used on something. So there will be a stool in the house that is painted. So every time your house is painted, there is that one painted stool that is painted. I guarantee you, every household will have that. What I'm trying to say is, just because you have something doesn't mean you have to use it. So suppose I give you 5 liters of paint. What I'm trying to say is, this is 5 liters of paint. Use it. Don't ask for extra. It is not compulsory you have to finish all the 5 liters. But don't ask for extra. Or in other words, the word total availability means that if your parents give you 1,000 rupees for shopping, you go out, you like something, you buy. If you like something for 500, is it okay to buy? No, I have 1000 rupees. Why will I buy for 500? It's nothing like that. I have 1000 rupees. No. If I like something, I will buy for 500. If I like something for 600, I can buy. If I don't like anything, don't buy and come back. But if you like something for 1500, can you buy? No. My maximum limit is 1000 rupees. Or my limiting factor on the resource is 1000 rupees. Or the total availability is 80 hours of machine time. अब ऐसा नहीं है कि 70 घंटे में काम हो गया तो 10 घंटा मशीन चालू रखो, let it run. It's nothing like that. If you're finished in 70 hours, it's okay. Rest of the 10 hours, let somebody clean the machine. If it's off, it's okay. Don't ask for more than 80 hours is what I'm saying. So when you say the total machine time that you require and what you have should be exactly the same, no. All I'm trying to say is the total available is 80. Use all 80. That I'm okay with. Don't ask for more than 80. So the total time that you require can be less than or equal to 80. Don't ask for more than 80. The total craftsman time that you are going to need can be 70. If you don't want to use all 70, if you only require 65, fine. Take only 65 hours. Jabardasti nahi hai that you are paying him for 70 hours, so kaam karate raho. If there is no work, let him sit, it's okay. He'll clean around, he'll do other stuff. What I'm trying to say is don't ask for more than 70 hours. That I can't give you. In 1 week, the maximum I can give you as far as craftsman time is concerned is 70 hours. So what you want to produce X and Y should be less than or equal to 70. Okay. Less than 80 and less than 70, no, don't produce. Make 0x and 0y. That I can't do. X and Y are giving me profits. So what I have to do is, I have to maximize the profit. What is that profit? Well, I'll call that profit Z. What is that Z? The profit Z is, one article of X gives me 100 rupees. So X articles of X will give me 100X. One article Y gives me 150 rupees. Then Y article of Y will give me 150Y. So I have to maximize this profit. Oh, you have to maximize this profit. Do one thing, make 100 units of X and 200 units of Y. That I can't do because I only have 80 hours on the machine. I can't make 100 units of X and 100 units of Y. You know that will require how much? That will require 250 hours of machine time for X and 150 hours of machine time for Y. 150 plus 250 is a total of 400. Do I have 400? No. So I know that profit will be high if I make more units, but the resources are saying keep it low and keep it in the limit of this 80 and this 70. So I have to maximize the profit Z, which is 100x plus 150y, but this maximization is subject to constraints. And what are the constraints? Well, the constraints are that 2.5x plus 1.5y should be less than or equal to 80 and 1.5x plus 2y should be less than or equal to 70. So choose an x and y that will give you very good profit. I agree. But make sure that x and y value agrees to the fact that this total should be less than or equal to 80 and this total should be less than or equal to 70. Fine. So can I do one thing? Can I say make minus 2 articles of X and minus 4 articles of Y? Is that allowed? Yeah. Put this in. No. What is minus 2 into 2.5? Well, it's minus 5. Plus. What is minus 4 into 1.5? Well, it's minus 6. What is minus 5 plus minus 6? Minus 11. Is minus 11 less than or equal to 80? Yes. Perfect. Works. For this equation, minus 2 and minus 4 is allowed. Arey, 1 minute. You are producing something. Can you produce in negatives? No. So mathematically, x and y can be negative. There is no problem. But practically, can x and y be negative? No. Then you have to add a non-negativity constraint telling them that 2.5x plus 1.5y should be less than or equal to 80. But make sure that x and y are never going to be negative, or x and y are always going to be greater than or equal to 0. And this right here is what they expect from you when they ask you to formulate. Now I'm going to do this one last time, but I am now going to write this as cleanly as possible. I read two things, x and y. So I'm going to manufacture x and manufacture y. To manufacture x and manufacture y, I need a machine to work. And along with that, I want a craftsman to work. One article of x requires 2.5 hours on the machine and 1.5 hours for the craftsman. One article of y requires 1.5 hours on the machine and 2 hours for the craftsman. The total availability is 80 hours of machine time and 70 hours of craftsman time, while the profit per unit x is 100 and per unit y is 150. Now because they have said x and y here, it becomes a little confusing. Imagine that this is table and chair. One table requires 2.5 hours on the machine, while 1.5 hours for the craftsman to finish it. One chair requires 1.5 hours on the machine and 2 hours for the craftsman to finish it. The total available machine time is 80 and the total available craftsman time is 70 hours. So I am going to say, number one, let the factory only, no? Yeah, let's stick to factory. Manufacture X units of article X and Y units of article Y. After having done that, the first thing that you will write is your objective function. Profit always has to be maximized. So I'm going to say maximize your profit Z. What is the profit Z? And Z is always and always used for profit function or your cost function. Z is what is always used. Maximize your profit Z. What is that Z? Z is 100x plus 150y. But this maximization is subject to constraints. And what are the constraints that it is subject to? It is subject to constraints that the 2.5x plus 1.5y should be less than or equal to 80 because that is the maximum available machine resource. And here I will write down machine hours availability or machine hour constraint. You can write it as machine hour constraint also. Then I will write down that 1.5x plus 2y should be less than or equal to 70. This is craftsman time constraints. And after that, I will tell them that this is fine, but make sure x and y never become negative, where x and y are always greater than or equal to 0. And this is the non-negativity constraint. And this is what every LPP will have. These 4 important parts. Part number 1, if you have given them variable x and y names, who is who? because anybody can give anything. Who have you decided who is what? That will come here. Part number 2, the formulation. First thing is your objective function. Part number 3 is your constraints. And part number 4 is your non-negativity constraint. You don't get extra marks for writing this, but if you do not write it, marks are definitely deducted. And when you are asked to formulate, these are the 4 parts that always have to be there in every formulation. And this is what you get marks for. I've gone as slow as possible in the first question. I will try and pick up pace now. After this, what are you going to do? Whatever question I pick, if I say I'm doing question number 10, you will pause the video, go to question number 10, try and formulate it yourself, and then come back to the solution. Every question. Let's check what next question we have to do. The next question that I want to do is question number 9. Again, the same thing. You will read it from start to end. You will find out what all did you read in it, and then start decoding one at a time. A carpenter has 90, 80 and 50 running feet of teak, plywood and rosewood. So they have given you the availability of teak, plywood and rosewood. That is what I read for now. Product A requires 2 1 1 running feet and B requires 1 to 1 running feet of teak, plywood and rosewood. Okay, so there are 2 products A and B. One requires teak, rosewood, plywood in a certain quantity. B requires teak, rosewood and plywood in a certain quantity. Fantastic. If A would sell for 48 rupees per unit and B would sell for 40 rupees per unit, how much of each should he make and sell in order to maximize his income? Correct? So you want to maximize income. Who's going to give you this income? Well, I'm going to sell A and B and get income. Then can I say A and B become your variables? Who is limiting you from making profit out of this or getting more sales? Well, my resources. What are my resources? My resources are teak, plywood and rosewood that are creating limitations. What are these limitations? Where the total availability of teak, plywood and rosewood is 90 feet, 80 feet and 50 feet respectively. Product A requires teak, plywood and rosewood. Product A requires 2 1 1 and B requires 1 2 1 running feet of teak, plywood and rosewood. What is the sales? Sales is 48 rupees per unit A and 40 rupees per unit B. I have to maximize this sales. Then start. Line number 1. Let us produce X units of A and Y units of B. If I produce X units of A and Y units of B, my total sales which has to be maximized is, I will say, so that will be my first line, X and Y. Let us produce X units of A and Y units of B. Second line will be, I have to maximize Z, and that is 48X plus 40Y. But remember that this maximization is subject to constraints. You all write entire subject to constraints. And what are the constraints? Number 1. Teak availability is only 90 feet. How much do you require? Well, I am making X units of A. So I require 2X units of teak wood for A and 1Y or Y units of teak wood for B. The total availability is 90, which means this total always has to be either less than or equal to 90. Don't cross 90. I don't have anything more than 90 to give you. Similarly, the plywood constraint will be that X plus 2Y should be less than or equal to 80. The rosewood constraint would be X plus Y is less than or equal to 50. So here I am going to write down teak wood constraint, ply wood constraint, and rose wood constraint. And lastly, remember you have to keep them low, but don't go into negatives. X and Y will always be greater than or equal to 0. Non-negativity constraint. And that is the formulation that they are expecting. 4 parts, always remember. Part number 1, who is who is X, who is Y. You can use other notifications also. I will show you a question with different notifications. But then whatever you use, you have to tell them that you have used this. Number 2, maximization of your, so your objective function, basically you can write here, objective function. Then your teak wood constraint, plywood constraint, rosewood constraint, and your non-negativity constraint. That is question number 9. Let's move on to the next question. Question number 10 is what I'm going to do next. You will pause here, do it yourself, and then come back. A firm makes CDs and DVDs to be sold in boxes of 10. The profit is rupees 20 per box of CD and rupees 30 per box of DVD. Both products are processed on 3 machines, M1, M2, M3. So what have I read till now? You are making CDs and DVDs and selling them in boxes. The profits per box of CD and DVD is given to you. Whoever's profit is given to you become your objective function or become your variables. This production is limited by 3 machines, M1, M2, M3. The time required in hours by each product and the total available in hours per week on each machine are as follows. So they have given you the details below. Oh, fantastic. The details are given to you in a table. And they are given to you as and how I want them. Meaning they have written the box of CDs and DVDs horizontally and machines 1, 2, 3 vertically. Which means it is in a format that I require. What do you want? How should the manufacturer schedule his production in order to maximize profit? Fine. Let me do one thing. Let me copy down this table as and how it is. So this is the table. The only thing not given to you in the table is the profits, which they have given you verbally. So I will write down profit for the CDs is 20 rupees per box and for the DVDs is 30 rupees per box. Done. Line number 1. Let us produce X units of CD boxes and Y DVD boxes. I will maximize my profit Z, which is 20X plus 30Y. This maximization is subject to constraints. And what are the constraints? Well, the constraints are that number 1, 3x plus 3y is the total time I require on machine 1 to make the CDs and the DVDs, but the total available is only 36 hours. So I will say that 3x plus 3y should always be less than 36 or equal to 36. Then 5x plus 2y should always be less than or equal to 15. 2x plus 6y is always less than or equal to 60. Where x and y is always greater than or equal to 0. I have not written a lot of things which I please beg and plead to you to write down. Number 1, let us produce X boxes of CDs and Y boxes of DVDs. Number 1. Number 2, this is going to be the machine 1 time constraint. This is going to be the machine 2 time constraint. This is going to be the machine 3 time constraint. And this is going to be the non-negativity constraint. That's it. This is what they expect from you when they say formulate. If you have paused the video and you've tried it yourself and this is what you got, fantastic. Let's move on to the next question. Let's come to the next question that I want to do, which is question number 11. A company can produce two articles X and Y. Each product has to go through three machines A, B, C. So I'm making products X and Y. They have to go through three machines A, B, C. So now with the little experience and knowledge that we have, can I say X, Y, A, B, C? ABC, in process of manufacture, the machine A can operate for a total time of 12 hours. So the total available of A is given to you as 12 hours. That of B, it takes 1 hour of each of the item X and Y. It takes 1 hour for each of the item X and Y. Machine B can operate for a total of 50 hours. Okay. It takes 5 hours for X and 2 hours for Y. 5 for X and 2 for Y. And lastly, machine C can be operated for a total of 60 hours. It takes 2 hours of item X and 6 hours for item Y. The profit. So profits are given to you. Profit per article X is rupees 50. And what about Y? Per article Y is rupees 100. Per article Y is rupees 100. Find the number of X and Y so produced to maximize profit. First line, let us produce X units of X and Y units of Y. Correct? I'm changing this. I'm changing it to let us produce X1 units of X and X2 units of Y. So X1 units of X and X2 units of Y. I'm going to say maximize Z. My profit now will be 50x1 plus 100x2 subject to constraints. What are constraints I have? Number 1, machine time on A constraint is 1 into X, which is X, 1 into Y, which is Y, should always be less than or equal to 12, never cross 12. That's the maximum I have available. 5x plus 2y should be less than or equal to 50, and 2x plus 6y should be less than or equal to 60. So this will become time on machine time A constraint, machine time B constraint, machine time C constraint, and then lastly x1, x1 plus x2 should be less than or equal to 12. 5x1 plus 2x2 should be less than or equal to 50. And lastly 2x1 plus 6x2 should be less than or equal to 60, where x1 and x2 is always greater than or equal to 0. Please make that change. I created equations or I created inequalities with x and y, which is wrong. My variables are not x and y, my variables are x1 and x2. That's it. Let's move on to the next question. The next question that I want to do is a rather lengthy question. So I've put it out in the entire screen. What does the question say? A cracker manufacturer produces crackers of two types, rockets and bombs. So there is a cracker manufacturer who is making rockets and bombs. And rockets and bombs packed in boxes of 100 in its two factories. F1 performs the basic assembly operation, F2 performs the finishing operation. So remember, we had like the article has to go through two machines. Here the article has to go through two factories. That's the only difference. Factory 1 performs the basic assembly, factory 2 performs the finishing. For financial reasons, factory 1 has only 180 hours. So there's a limitation on factory 1 time per week, and factory 2 only 120 hours are available. Factory 1 needs 3 hours on each box of rockets and 10 hours on each box of bombs. Factory 2 needs 6 hours on a box of rockets and 4 hours on a box of bombs. If the profit of the company is rupees 45 per box of rockets and 55 per box of bombs, find out how many boxes of rockets and bombs should the company manufacture per week in order to maximize its profit. Okay, I will do that for you. So let me minimize this question here, and now we will see it in parts. A cracker manufacturer produces crackers of 2 types, rockets and bombs, packed in boxes of hundreds in 2 factories, F1 and F2. So what are you making? You are making rockets and bombs in 2 factories, F1 and F2. Correct? For financial reasons, factory 1 is, what is the total available on factory 1? Is 180 hours, and the total available on factory 2 is 120 hours. Factory 1 needs 3 hours on a box of rockets and 10 hours on a box of bombs, while factory 2 needs, I can't see it anymore, 6 hours on a box of rockets and 4 hours on a box of bombs. The profit. What is the profit given to you? The profit of the company is rupees 45 per box of rocket, while rupees 55 per box of bombs. Find how many rockets and bombs should they produce. Fine. I will continue. Let's hide this now so that I have more space. Step number 1, let the company produce Y1 boxes of rockets and Y2 boxes of bombs. So here I have used Y1 and Y2. There I used X1 and X2. You can use X and Y also. But make sure you declare whatever you are using. So then the examiner also knows what notifies what. So this is Y1, this is Y2. Correct? I have to maximize profits always. So my objective will be maximize profit, which is Z, which is 45 Y1 plus 55 Y2, subject to constraints. Constraint number 1, factory 1 time constraint is 3 times of Y1 plus 10 times of Y2. This is the total time I require on factory 1 to make Y1 and Y2. This total should always be less than or equal to 180 because I don't have more time than 180 minutes or hours. So here write down factory F1 time constraint. This will be 6Y1 plus 4Y2 is less than or equal to 120 is factory 2 constraint. And lastly, remembering that Y1 and Y2 are number of units that you are producing which cannot be produced in negative. You don't want to produce, don't produce. Produce 0, that is allowed. Don't produce in negative, you are not allowed to produce negative. Y1 and Y2 is always greater than or equal to 0. And this is the non-negativity constraint. This is what they expect out of you in a formulation. That is what question? That is question number 12. Correct? Let's move on to the next question. Question number 13. Or let me do it like a full page thing. A factory uses 3 different resources to manufacture 2 products. So a factory uses 3 resources to manufacture 2 products. So I'm making 2 products that require 3 resources. 20 units of resource A, 12 units of resource B, and 16 units of resource C is available. So the total availability of resource A, B, C is A is available for 20 units, B for 12 units, and C for 16. Now that can be anything. It could be paint available. So I have 20 units, which is 20 liters of paint. B could be manpower. I have 20 units of B, which could be hours. So I have 12 units of 12 hours of B available. C could be raw material in kgs. So I have 16 kgs of C available. It could be anything. They have written it in units, so we'll consider it in units. 1 unit of the first product requires 2 units of A, 2 units of B, and 4 units of C. And the second product requires 4 units of A, 2 units of B, and no units of C. If it is known that the first product gives a profit of 2 units and the second gives a profit of 3 units, formulate the LPP. How many units of each must be produced to maximize the profit? Fine then. Let me now look at it in parts, not as a whole. So let's hide this and let's unhide this. So what did I read? I read that a factory manufactures 2 different products. So that is product 1 and product 2. To make product 1 and product 2, they require 3 resources, A, B, and C. They have not mentioned what the 3 resources are. The total available of resource A is 20 units, B is 12 units, and C is 16 units. 1 unit of the first requires 2 units of A, 2 units of B, and 4 units of C. 1 unit of the second product requires 4 units of A, 2 units of B, and no C, which means 0 C. What are the profits given to you? The profit per unit the profit for the first unit is 2 and the second is 3. So you can choose anything as x1 and 2. So I'm writing that here. Let it is known that the first product gives a profit of 2. Okay, man. So let us manufacture x1 units of 1 and x2 units of 2. So this is x1 and this is x2. So step 1 will be maximize Z. What is Z of profit? Which is 2 times x1 plus 3 times x2. But this maximization is subject to constraints. Write it in total, subject to 2 constraints. And what are the constraints? Constraint number 1. 2 times of x1 plus 4 times of x2. Total available is 20. So should be less than or equal to 20. 2 times of x1 plus 2 times of x2 should be less than or equal to 12. 4 times of x1 plus, you can write 0x2, but 0x2 is nothing. So you can just write it as less than or equal to 16. So 4x1 is less than or equal to 16. And lastly, non-negativity, where x1 and x2 are always greater than or equal to 0. No matter what happens here, always remember that x1 and x2 should always and always be greater than or equal to 0. They can never ever be less than 0. This is the formulation that they are expecting. Let's move on to the next question. I want to now change the course of questions a little and introduce the second kind of a objective. So we've been doing all maximization objective questions. Let's now give maximization a pause and do a minimization objective, because once that is done, there isn't much new left to do, but yeah, there are a few interesting questions also. Let's begin. A diet for a growing child must contain at least 4,000 units of vitamins, 50 units of minerals, and 1,400 calories. What does that mean? It means that a growing child, when fed, whatever food the child is fed, whether it's rice with milk or curd or any supplement, whatever is fed, the minimum requirement of that child is that 400 units of vitamins have to be given to the child, 50 units of minerals have to be given to the child, and 1400 calories have to be given to the child. Two foods A and B are available such that 1 unit of A contains 200 units of vitamins, 1 unit of minerals, and 40 calories, and 1 unit of B contains 100 units of vitamins, 2 minerals, and again 4 calories. Cost of the food A is rupees 70 and rupees 80. Construct a problem to minimize cost. So again the same. You have to minimize cost of what? A and B. When will you pay? Well, when you use, you pay. Then don't use, no. Don't use, you don't have to pay. Arey, that is not allowed. My child, wherever that poor kid is, needs a minimum of 4,000 units of vitamins, 50 units of minerals, and 1400 calories. Then if that is the case, you want your child to be healthy, give them the entire packet in one day. Arey, I can't do that also. Because A, it's unhealthy, and B, requires money. So this is the kind of a question where the constraints are pushing you up. Use as much as you want to. There is no upper bound. There is a lower bound. Initially there was an upper bound. I couldn't cross 80 hours. Here I am allowed to cross 4,000 units of vitamins because it is minimum 4,000. More than 4,000 is allowed. Less than 4,000 is not allowed. Whatever said, whose cost is to be minimized? A and B. Then A and B become your variables. Who are causing a constraint or limitation in minimizing of the cost? Well, 3 things. Number 1 is requirements of vitamins. Number 2 is requirements of minerals. And number 3 is calories. What is the minimum requirement? At least means minimum required. At most means maximum available. The minimum requirement of vitamin is 4,000 units. The minimum requirement of vitamin is 4,000 units. Minerals is 50 units. And calories is 1,400 units. What are the 2 foods providing me? The 2 foods A and B are available such that 1 unit of A contains 200 vitamins. So if I take 1 unit of A, it will have 200 vitamins in it. 1 unit of mineral in it and 40 calories in it. If I take 1 unit of B, it will contain 100 units of vitamins, 2 minerals and 40 calories again. The cost of the 2 is given to me. A costs rupees 70 while B costs rupees 80. So I am going to say, let us cost of the foods is blah blah blah. What is the word that they have used? Nothing as such. So that let's say let the diet contain. Let the diet contain X units of A and Y units of B. So A is taken in X, B is taken in Y. 1 unit of A has 200 vitamins in it. So 2 units will have 400 units. 3 units will have 600 units. I am taking X, no? Then X units will have 200 X units of vitamins, and Y units of B will have 100 Y units of vitamins. So the total vitamins that I will be feeding the kid is 200x plus 100y. What will be the total minerals I will be feeding the kid? 1 into x, which is x, 2 into y, which is 2y. What is the total calories that I will be feeding the child? The total calories that I will be feeding the child is 40x plus 40y. But this is what I will be giving. What is their limitation? Their limitation is on the lower end. They are saying you have to give them a minimum of 4,000, a minimum of 50 minerals, a minimum of 1400 calories. So this total should be a minimum of 4,000. What does that mean? I'll give you an example. You are sitting for an exam. The teacher asks, how many supplements do you want? You say, mathematics paper, I need a minimum of 3 supplements. How many supplements will the teacher give you? If the teacher gives you 2 supplements, will you be okay with it? You will say, no, I want minimum 2. Okay, so if the teacher gives you 5 supplements, I will keep them. Because I will definitely require more than 3. I don't know how much. So more than 3 is okay, less than 3 is not a good idea. Suppose you are going to write an exam and it's an exam at a different center where you don't go before. So you call up a lot of friends and tell them, oh, how do I travel from here to here, here to there? Oh, first take a rickshaw, then take a bus, or take a rickshaw and then take a train. But if you take a train, you'll again have to take a rickshaw and walk, and so on. And then you do all the possible permutations and combinations. And then you finally reach a point where you realize that if I want to travel in time, I need at least 200 rupees with me. So if you tell your parents that I need at least 200 rupees, what will your parents give you? Is it okay if they give you 100? Well, knowing our parents, they might give you 100 also. Knowing my parents, they might give you 10 rupees and say, figure it out yourself. But a good parent will definitely give you more than 200 rupees. Because more than 200 is a good idea. Less than 200 is a bad idea. Why? Because the minimum requirement is 200. I might require more. I will definitely not require less. I will require anything 200 or more. So when you say that the requirement is at least 4,000, I need to make sure that the combination in which I am mixing them, this combination should always be greater than or equal to 4,000. This combination should be greater than or equal to 50, and this combination should be greater than or equal to 4,000, knowing that x and y, which is the number of units of A and the number of units of B, should always be greater than or equal to 0. You want more than 4,000 units of vitamins, no? And write down here, this is vitamin constraint, this is mineral constraint, and this is minimum requirement of vitamin constraint, minimum require of mineral constraint, and minimum require of calorie constraint. So you want to make sure that this total is greater than 4,000. Fine then. Why don't you give them 10 kgs of X and 20 kgs of Y? It will definitely be more than 4,000. I can't do that because I will lose a lot of money. So I had to write down my objective, no? Let's write down your objective. What will your objective be? Your objective will be minimize, not maximize here. Minimize Z. What is Z? The cost. What is the cost? 70x plus 80y. If you want to keep the cost minimum, don't feed them only, no? Who cares? No. This minimization is subject to constraints. What are the constraints? What are the constraints? Well, constraint number 1 is that 200x plus 100y should be greater than or equal to 4,000. X plus 2y should be greater than or equal to 50, and 40x plus 40y should be greater than or equal to 1400, where x and y is always greater than or equal to 0. And this is a standard minimization question. Let's continue to the next and do a few minimization questions. Now after this you can do the same. When I call out a question, you will wait for me to do it, or you will do it yourself, and then you will check with whatever I have done, so that you will also get an idea whether you are getting it or not. So before I continue to the next question, no matter what, if it's minimization or maximization, these four parts have to be there. Your declaration, your objective function, your constraint. Sometimes there are only two, sometimes there are three, and your non-negativity. These four parts have to be there. This table is for you. If the table is not drawn, it's okay. But I would suggest draw the table, show it to them, who cares? You don't get marks for the table. This is for you. This is for them. This is the formulation that they are expecting. Let's do a few minimization questions. That was the first question that I want to do in minimization. Let's go in a line only now. Let's come to the immediate next question. Two different kinds of foods, A and B, are being considered to form a weekly diet. So there are two foods that I'm considering for a weekly diet. Okay. The minimum weekly requirement of fats, carbohydrates and proteins is 18, 24 and 16 units respectively. So they've told you how much minimum I require, which means that requirement of fats, carbohydrates and proteins is going to be the limiting factor. 1 kg of food A has 4, 16 and 8 units respectively of these ingredients, and 1 kg of B has 12, 4 and 6 units respectively of these ingredients. The prices of food A is rupees 4 per kg and that of B is 3 per kg. Construct the problem to minimize cost. Fine. Whose cost is given? A and B. Then A and B become my variables. What is limiting the use of these variables? Well, the requirement of fats, carbohydrates and proteins. In that order? Yes. Fats, carbohydrates and proteins is limiting the use of this. Why? Because there is a minimum daily requirement. And what is the, minimum weekly requirement. What is the minimum weekly requirement? The minimum weekly requirement of fat, carbohydrates and proteins is 18, 24 and 16 units respectively. 1 kg of food A has 4, 16 and 8 units respectively of these, and 1 kg of food B has 12, 4 and 6 units respectively. The prices of food A is rupees 4 per kg. So the cost is given to you. What is the cost given to you? A is 4 per kg and B is, and that of, that is wrongly printed. No, correct. And that of B is rupees 3 per kg. Construct the problem to minimize cost. Line 1 will be, let us consider X units of A and Y units of B. I have to minimize cost. Extremely sorry. Minimize cost. Z is equal to 4x plus 3y. This minimization with 4x and 3y is subject to constraints. What is the constraint? The fat requirement, which is 4x plus 12y, which I am giving them, should be a minimum of 18, which means this total can be greater than or equal to 18, can never be less than 18. The carbohydrate requirement, which is 16x plus 4y, should be greater than or equal to 24, can never ever be less than 24. And the protein requirement is 8x plus 6y should be greater than or equal to 16, where x and y is always greater than or equal to 0. So make sure you write here that this is the fat, minimum fat requirement constraint, minimum carbohydrate requirement constraint, and minimum protein requirement constraint, non-negativity constraint. Done. This is again another standard minimization problem. Let's move on to the next. A chef is planning a new cocktail for a party, which is to be made using 3 basic ingredients A, B and C. So chef is planning a cocktail. A cocktail is basically a drink and he's using 3 ingredients to make this drink, which is A, B and C. So that it will at least have 10 liters of A, 12 liters of B and 20 liters of C. What do you mean by at least? Minimum. So it will have a minimum of 10 liters of A, minimum of 12 liters of B and minimum of 20 liters of C. So can I say this is a minimum requirement question? Next, he makes this cocktail by mixing 2 compounds, 1 and 2. Each unit of compound 1 has 4 liters of A, 3 liters of B and no C. Each unit of compound 2 has 1 liter of A, 2 liters of B, 4 liters of C. The unit cost of the compound 1 and 2 is 400 and 600 respectively. What do you want me to do? Well, what I want you to do is formulate the problem to minimize the cost. Okay. Whose cost? The cost of 1 and 2, which means 1 and 2 become my variables. What is the limiting factor on 1 and 2? Well, there are 3 limitations on 1 and 2. They have 3 basic ingredients A, B and C, whose minimum requirement A should be at least 10 liters, B should be at least 12 liters and C should be at least 20 liters. Each unit of compound 1 has 4 liters of A, 3 liters of B and no C, while each of compound 2 has 2 liters of 1 liter of A, 2 liters of B and 4 liters of C. Cost is given to you. The cost of compound A is rupees 400 per liter and compound B is 600 per liter. What am I going to say? I am going to say, let us have X units of 1 and Y units of 2. So I will say, I have to minimize the cost. What is the cost? Z, which is 400x plus 600y. I am taking X units of 1 and Y units of 2. So the total I am paying is 400x plus 600y. This cost minimization is subject to constraints. Write it in full, write it as subject to constraint. What are the constraints? Constraint number 1, and that is element A constraint. What is the element A constraint? That 4x plus y should be at least 10, which means 4x plus y should be greater than or equal to 10. 3x plus 2y should be greater than or equal to 12. 0x, which is 0, 4y, which is 4y, should be greater than or equal to 20. Write down here that this is element A minimum requirement or minimum constraint, element B minimum constraint and element C minimum constraint. Where I always have to remember that I am buying or I am mixing 2 compounds. I can not choose to mix one. I can say I am not taking 1, I am only taking 2. That is allowed. But you can't say I am taking minus 2 liters of 1 and 2 liters of 2. That is not allowed. So where X and Y is always greater than or equal to 0. No matter what the rest is, this will always remain greater than or equal to 0. So the first line is where I will tell them what X and Y is. Second is your objective. Third is your constraints. And fourth is your non-negativity. That is question number 5. Let's move on to the next question. So let's quickly finish off the basic questions there. Okay. So we can move to the slightly different ones. And that is question number 13. Because it's a rather big question, I have posted it large. A factory uses 3 different resources to manufacture 2 products. 1 minute. I think we did this question. Yes. So we are not going to do question number 13. What are we doing? Question number 7. And that is, the question says a company produces 3 types of toys for children: pianos, keyboard and accordion. So 3 types of toys. One is a piano. I hope everybody knows what a piano is. Basically a keyboard. A piano is like an acoustic keyboard. Then there is a keyboard which is like an electric piano, and there's an accordion. Accordion is the thing that Amitabh Bachchan played in Amar Akbar Anthony, if you've seen the movie. Classic, you should. With cost of rupees 60, 80 and 40. So a company produces 3 types of toys, which is pianos, keyboards and accordions with the cost of rupees 60, 80 and 40. So it costs rupees 60 to make a piano, rupees 80 to make a keyboard and rupees 40 to make an accordion. They use 3 resources A, B and C. For production, as per their contract, the supplier of the resource, the company is required to utilize at least 30, 40 and 50 units of these 3 resources. What does this mean? What it means is that if you have hired a certain person, you can't just get done like 2 hours of work from the person and then say, ho gaya, chalo, jao. No. You have to use that person for a minimum amount of time. And that is what it says. For example, when you take a wholesale order, you say no, that minimum this much you will have to order, then only we send. That is what it means, that you have to use a minimum of these resources. So if you are ordering the resource from me, you cannot order just like 1 kilo or 2 kilo. You have to at least use 30 units of the first, 40 of the second and 50 units of the third resource per month. Formulate the problem so as to minimize the cost of manufacturing of the company if you are given that. A piano requires 5 units of A, 4 units of B and 3 units of C. A keyboard requires 6 units of A, 7 units of B, 5 units of C. An accordion requires 3 units of A, 2 units of B and 2 units of C. So you have to minimize the cost. Cost of what? You have to minimize the cost of 3 types of toys, and that is piano, keyboard and accordion. Can I say a little dynamic has changed with respect to the fact that there are 3 products now. What are the 3 products? Well, the 3 products are piano, keyboard and accordion. The cost is given, which I'll write at the end. Let me see what resources are given. They use resources A, B and C. So A, B, C are the 3 resources that they use, and then I can write down the cost. What is the cost? 60 rupees for the piano, 80 rupees for the keyboard and 40 rupees for the accordion. They use 3 resources A, B and C for production as per their contract with the supplier. They have to utilize at least, so minimum utilization is 30 units of A, 40 units of B and 50 units of C. This much you have to utilize minimum. Formulate the problem to minimize the cost where the following details are given. A piano requires 5 units of A, 4 units of B, 3 units of C. A keyboard requires 6 units of A, 7 units of B, 5 units of C. And an accordion requires 3 units of A, 2 units of B and 2 units of C. Done. This is it then. All data is in the table to begin with. Now, when I say that let the manufacturer produce X units of piano, Y units of keyboards and Z units of accordion, it's okay. But the problem is, the letter Z is standard dedicated to the objective function. And that is why we refrain from using Z in our assumption. So what do we use? You can then use X1, x2, x3 or y1, y2, y3. So you will say that let the producer manufacture x1 units of pianos, x2 units of keyboards and x3 units of accordions. After that, I will say I have to minimize cost. What is your cost? 60x1 plus 80x2 plus 40x3, and this minimization of cost is subject to constraints, and the constraint is number 1, 5x1 plus 6x2 plus 3x3. Now, whatever you require, make sure that it is at least 30 because you have to utilize 30 units. So this total can be greater than or equal to 30. 4x1 plus 7x2 plus 2x3 should be greater than or equal to 40. 3x1 plus 5x2 plus 2x3 should be greater than or equal to 50, where x1, x2 and x3 is always greater than or equal to 0. Write down here minimum utilization of resource A constraint, minimum utilization of resource B constraint, minimum utilization of resource C constraint, non-negativity constraint. That's it. We are done with the formulation. That was question number 7. Let's move on to the next question. Let's move on to the immediate next question, and that is question number 8. A company produces two types of dog food, F1 and F2. The cost is rupees 50 and 30 per unit. Each type of food contains two types of nutrients N1 and N2 in different quantities. Each unit of F1 contains 2 units of N1, 4 units of N2. Each unit of F2 contains 3 units of N1, 2 units of N2. The minimum daily requirement of N1 and N2 for a dog is 6 units and 8 units respectively. Find how many units of F1 and F2 should be fed daily to the dog to meet the minimum requirement of N1 and N2 at minimum cost. Whose cost? The cost of F1 and F2, which means I have to minimize the cost obeying the minimum requirement constraint. Okay, let me minimize the question. A company produces two dog foods, F1 and F2. So F1, F2, and these foods have two nutrients, N1 and N2. Each type of food contains two types of nutrients, N1 and N2, in different quantities. Each unit of F1 contains 2 units of N1 and 4 units of N2. Each unit of F2 contains 3 units of N1 and 2 units of N2. The minimum requirement of N1 and N2 is, so minimum requirement is 6 units of N1 and 8 units of N2 respectively. The cost of F1 and F2 is given to you. The cost of F1 is rupees 50 and the cost of F2 is rupees 30. Done? Simple. Let the amount of the first food F1 be X units and F2 be Y units, or X1 and X2, Y1 and Y2, whatever they are asking you, whatever you want to take, but declare it. I'm taking X1, X2. So I will say minimize cost. What is cost? Z is 50x1 plus 30x2. This minimization is subject to constraints. Constraint number 1 is 2x1 plus 3x2 should be a minimum of 6. So this total can be greater than or equal to 6. 4x1 plus 2x2 should be greater than or equal to 8, where x1 and x2 are always greater than or equal to 0. Some people write this separately also. x1 is greater than or equal to 0, comma, x2 is greater than or equal to 0. Either way is allowed. That's it. That's your formulation. That is question number 8. Let's move to the next question. Let's now come to whatever I have left in between, and I have left it for a reason. because these questions are with a slight twist. So let's begin with the first question in that, which is question number 6. What does the question say? A company manufactures 3 types of bags: small, medium and big. Okay. Raw material and labor available per week are 100 units and 70 units. So maximum amount of raw material available is 100 units and labor available is 70 units. S requires 2 units of raw material, 6 hours of labor. M requires 4 units of raw material, 5 hours of labor, whereas B requires 7 units of material and 3 hours of labor. It is observed that however they tried, the total number of bags produced per week does not exceed 75. Formulate the problem for maximizing the profit if the profit per bag, per small bag is rupees 50, medium bag is 60 and big bag is rupees 90. So whose profit do I have to maximize? The small, medium and the large bag. Well, if I have to maximize the profit of the small, medium and the large bag, then the small, medium and the large bag become my variables. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that small, medium, large are my variables. What do I require to make these bags? Well, I require raw material is one resource and the other is labor. They are saying that on a weekly basis, the total raw material available is 100 units if I am right on the raw material. Yes. And 70 hours of labor. How much do I require for which bag? Well, the small S requires 2 units of raw material and 6 hours of labor. 2 units of raw material and 6 hours of labor. While M requires 4 units of raw material and 5 hours of labor. While the big bag requires 7 units of raw material and 3 hours of labor. The profits of the 3 bags are given to us. Yes, what are the profits? The profits are, and I would definitely suggest, this is one question which I would want you to do it yourself and then come to my solution. So the profits are 50, 60 and 90. They want you to formulate to maximize the profit. Fine, no problem with that. Let's begin then. I have to, so I will say let the manufacturer produce x1 units of the small bag, x2 units of the medium bag and x3 units of the large bag. So small is x1, medium is x2, large is x3. After saying that, I'm going to go to the next step and I'm going to say profit. So I will maximize Z, which is 50x1 plus 60x2 plus 90x3, subject to constraints. Constraint number 1, the raw material constraint, which is 2x1 plus 4x2 plus 7x3. Total available is 100 units. What does that mean? Use 100. Don't ask for more than 100. So this total should either be less than or equal to 100. Write down here, this is the raw material availability constraint. What is the labor availability constraint? 6x1 plus 5x2 plus 3x3 is less than or equal to 70. This is the labor availability constraint, where x1, x2, x3 is always greater than or equal to 0. Done. That's your answer. No, that's not. You are missing out on something. You are missing out on a very important line, and the line is right here. And the line is that it is observed that however they have tried, the total number of bags produced per week does not exceed 75. What does that mean? What that means is, no matter how much you try, the maximum you can produce is 75 bags. But 75 bags of whom? 75 small? No. 75 large? No. 75 medium? Then 75 of the total. You make anything in any number, I don't care. Total manufacturing never crosses 75. Then can I say this constraint or this limitation cannot be put into a table? Because it is a limitation not on a resource. It is not a resource which is limited. It is a limitation on number of units, or it is a limitation on the production of number of units. And that is why such a constraint or such a limitation which is on the number of units, which is not on a resource, cannot be put into a table. And I like to call it a non-table constraint. A constraint that cannot be put into a table. What are you saying? That the total number of bags produced will never cross 75. Okay, how many am I making? Well, I am making x1 small, x2 large, and x3 medium. Sorry, x1 small, x2 medium, x3 large. This total never crosses 75, which means it can be less than or equal to 75. And this is the total number of units produced constraint. And this is one that people forget. Always remember, there will be questions where they might have a restriction on the numbers produced. And if it is a restriction on the numbers produced, you can't put it into a table. You have to write it down separately. That's it. That is question number 6 if I'm correct. Let's move on to the next question, and I want to do question number 1. It's an interesting question. What does question number 1 say? Small question. The question says that a dealer deals in 2 items, hard disks and pen drives. Okay, so there's a dealer who's dealing in 2 items, hard disks and pen drives. He has rupees 50,000 to invest and a space to store 60 pieces. He has how many? 50,000 rupees to invest and a space to store how much? 60 pieces. A hard disk costs rupees 2,500 and a pen drive costs rupees 500. Construct a problem to maximize profit. What? Cost is given and they are asking you to maximize profit. 1 minute. If the profit per hard disk is 1,000 and pen drive is 150, so profit is also given and cost is also given. This is stupid. I cannot have a by objective function, a function where objective is minimization and maximization also. That is because they are asking you to maximize profit. Cost is not a constraint. A cost is not an objective. Cost is a constraint. Do you notice they have written that the total he can invest is 50,000 rupees? So money is a constraint. It is not an objective. So hard disks, pen drives, cost. A hard disk costs rupees 2,500 and a pen drive costs rupees 500. What is the total available with him? Well, the total available with him is 50,000 rupees. He cannot spend anything more than 50,000 rupees. Okay. And a space to store 60. Space to store 60 pieces is a limitation on a resource. No, it's a limitation on number of units. That is why I cannot put it into the table. Done then. The last thing is profit. A profit per hard disk is 1,000 rupees and per pen drive is 150 rupees. I am going to say let him purchase X hard drives and Y pen drives. So I am going to say I will maximize Z, which is 1000x plus 150y. This maximization is subject to the fact that the total money required to buy hard disks plus the total money required to buy pen drives can never be more than 50,000, has to be less than or equal to 50,000. This is the maximum investment constraint. And he has the space to store 60 items is a limitation on number. It is not a limitation on resource. And that is why I will say that he is buying X pen drives and X hard drives and Y pen drives. This total number of hard drives and pen drives cannot be more than 60 because I can't store more than 60. So no matter how much you buy what, the total should always be less than or equal to 60. This is the total number of units that can be stored constraint or the storage constraint. And lastly, X and Y is the number of pen drives and hard drives is always greater than or equal to 0, is never ever less than 0. That is question number 1. Let's move on to the next question that I want to do. And the next question that I want to do is the last few questions, which is question number 14. These are the questions that I would expect you to try them yourself and then only come back to the to my solution. Try them yourself. A very good question. A company manufactures 2 models of Spider-Man for children, Model A and Model B. To stay in business, it must produce at least 50 models of A per month. However, it does not have the facilities to produce more than 200 units of that model per month. It also does not have the facilities to produce more than 150 models of B per month, while the total demand does not exceed 300 per month. Let's go to the next. What are they saying? If the profit is rupees 40 on each model A and 30 on each model B, how many of each model should be manufactured for maximum profit? So the profits of model A and model B are given. But can I say one thing? There is no resource given. There is zero resource availability, maximum availability, minimum requirement, nothing. All the limitations are on number and only number. So, model A, model B. What are the profits given to you? Well, the profit per model A is 30 and B is 40. Sorry, 40 and 30, 40 and 30. 40, 30. Now, because there is no other resource, there is only limitation on number, I can't really put anything in a table. So this is it. I will say let him produce X units of A and Y units of B. I will maximize Z, which is 40X plus 30Y. And this maximization is subject to constraint. Let's come to the constraints. Constraint number 1. To stay in business, it must produce at least 50 models of A. So how many models of A are you assuming? I am assuming X. Then this X should be at least 50, which means X should be at least 50, meaning more than 50 is allowed, less than 50 is not allowed. So this X should be how much? Should be greater than or equal to 50. However, it does not have the facility to produce more than 200 of that model per month. Although the total number of A produced should be more than 50. But resource wise, nobody can produce more than 200. Which means that X should be less than or equal to 200. it also does not have the facility to produce more than 150 models of B. How many models of B are you producing? Y. Which means this Y will never ever cross 150 because they don't have the resource to produce more than 150 of B. So my Y should be greater than, should always be less than or equal to 150. Because they don't have the resource to produce more than 150, then Y will always be less than or equal to 150. And lastly, while the total demand of whom? A and B. So A and B in total will be X and Y. This total demand never ever exceeds 30 per month. So this total should always be less than or equal to 300, because you cannot produce, even if you produce more than 300, you cannot sell them. The total demand is only for 300 units. That's it. That's my formulation. From the top once again, it must produce at least 50 units of air. So X should be greater than or equal to 50. But it does not have the resource to produce more than 200, which means X should be less than or equal to 200. It also does not have the resource to produce more than 150 of B, which means Y should be less than or equal to 150. And X plus Y should be less than or equal to 300. Where X and Y is always greater than or equal to 0. That's it. That's your formulation. A very good question where no other resource is mentioned. All the limitations are on production and production only. Let's move on to one last question, and that is question number 15, and then we are done, which is also an interesting question. What does the question say? The standard weight of a special purpose grinder has to be at least 5 kg. So you're making a grinder, correct? So probably a stone grinder, and the standard weight of that grinder should be at least 5 kg. Okay. And it has to contain two basic ingredients, B1 and B2. Okay. So you have to mix B1 and B2 and make the grinder. B1 costs rupees 5 per kg while B2 costs rupees 8 per kg. So the cost of A and B, B1 and B2 is given to you. Strength considerations dictate that the grinder contain not more than 4 kgs of B1 and a minimum of 2 kgs of B2. Find the minimum cost of the grinder satisfying the above condition. Again, another question where all limitations are on the quantity. There is no resource based limitation. So we'll start with the same. B1 and B2. The costs of B1 and B2 are given to you. B1 costs rupees 5 per kg while B2 costs rupees 8 per kg. I am going to say, let's take X units of B1 and Y units of B2. The standard weight of a special purpose grinder has to be at least 5 kg. Which means that when I bring X and Y together, which means B1 and B2 together, this total has to be at least 5 kg, which means this total can be greater than or equal to 5, can never ever be less than 5. B1 costs rupees 5 per kg, B2 costs rupees 8 per kg. I have to minimize the cost. I did not write the objective function. So I will say minimize Z, which is 5x plus 8y subject to constraints. Next, strength considerations dictate that the grinder contains not more than 4 kg of B1. How much are you taking? I am taking x kg. Well, then remember one thing. This x cannot be more than 4 kg. The grinder contains not more than 4 kg of B1, which means x that you are taking cannot be more than 4 kg, has to be less than or equal to 4. and a minimum of 2 kg of B2. B2 is Y. This Y should be at least 2 kg, which means this Y should be greater than or equal to 2. The minimum cost of the grinder satisfying the above condition is, so where X and Y is always greater than or equal to 0. Another beautiful question where all limitations are only and only on the weights and nothing else. With this, LPP comes to a sweet end. I want you to make sure that you practice this sheet at least once, and unfortunately I have to tell you that after this usually I do what question paper, how many times asked. Well, unfortunately LPP has never been asked till date. So I am going to make a note in my book saying that the chapter LPP, which is linear programming problems, has never been asked till date. So chapter 9, linear programming problems, never ever been asked till date. But please do this important chapter. When you again come to the finals, I will be doing this part of costing with you, so it will be easier for me to teach you if you remember whatever we've done here. And even when you come to finals, there will be a few students who've joined new, and whoever is joined new, I will again come back to this sheet only. So I'm going to do this sheet again, don't worry. But yeah, this is it. With this, LPP comes to an end, never been asked till date. Thank you very much.